Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Wednesday, August 16th, 2022. This morning, we were expecting to talk to Lakiesha Poole of the African American Job Fair, virtual job fair. Lakeisha, last moment, we just heard she cannot join us this morning. So we will have to table the conversation of this job fair at a later time. However, we will discuss this morning the Inflation Reduction Act and other news with James Wright of the Washington Informer, who should be joining us shortly. But yesterday was a historic day for President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and the entire administration. He signed the $750 billion Inflation Reduction Act into law. The sweeping legislation represents the largest climate investment in American history and making major changes to health policy by giving Medicare the power for the first time to negotiate the prices of certain prescription drugs and extending expiring healthcare subsidies for 3 years. The legislation will reduce the deficit, be paid for through new taxes, including a 15% minimum tax on large corporations and a 1% tax on stock buybacks. It will also boost the Internal Revenue Service's ability to collect. It will raise over $700 billion in government revenue over the next 10 years, according to the president, and they will spend about $430 billion of that to reduce carbon emissions and extend subsidies for health insurance under Obamacare. It also strengthens Obamacare, continues to carry those subsidies. In fact, according to a White House fact sheet, it's going to reduce just about everyone's premium payments who get their health insurance through the Affordable Care Act. So the president is touting this as a major victory, and indeed it is a major victory for this administration, which has really been taking a lot of criticism and a lot of hits. In fact, we had one congressman, unnamed congressperson, told a news outlet that President Biden will not run for re-election, which the White House has pushed back on, saying the president has continued to be steadfast about his intentions for the 2024 elections. But importantly for Democrats, the 2022 midterms are right ahead, and a bill of this magnitude could and is seen by some as a game changer, even for the prognostications, as I said that right, for the midterms. Earlier this year, it was believed that the Republicans would absolutely run away with the midterms, take back control of the Senate and the House. And now, with the victories of this administration, they are believing that the tide has turned. Also, this morning, childhood lead. Here's a story that we are sure to update you on and bring more light on when you go to blackpressusa.com and the platforms of the Black Press of America. A new study led by Duke University found that elevated levels of lead can lead to lower test scores among Black students. The findings, which was published this week in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, are based on surveys of more than 25,000 fourth graders in North Carolina. The data shows that Black students are disproportionately exposed to lead in racially segregated neighborhoods, and that the stresses are linked to poor test scores in reading among Black youth relative to their white peers. It is a issue that also, according to the White House and according to fact sheets on the Inflation Reduction Act, should be tackled because of this new inflation reduction law. Lead has long been a problem in the Black community, in older school buildings as well, and of course in North Carolina, as we pointed out, 25,000 fourth graders were or have been affected by some lead, according to the National Academy of Sciences. So it's also a story, again, that we'll be taking a close look at on Black Press USA and the platforms of the Black Press of America. So stay tuned for that. And of course, more information right here on Let It Be Known. So the Black Career Job Fair, we were going to talk about with Lakiesha Poole. With that, new global research shows that despite companies' recent efforts, diverse employees need more, and businesses should ask themselves new questions for a changed workplace. Despite rising costs because of inflation and talk of recession, many companies are reviving return to office plans so they can go back into the traditional 9 to 5 office environments. However, there are recent studies that show many Black professionals who are currently working remotely who want a hybrid or full-time remote working model. And to keep pace with fluctuating work trends, there's a nationwide virtual remote focused career event that connects Black job seekers in search of new career opportunities with companies that are looking for Black professionals exclusively. And that was the digest. That was really the Reader's Digest version of the African American Employee Network's virtual career job fair. Joining us now is James Wright of the Washington Informer.
Good
James,
morning.
good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm doing fine. Thank you.
James, first of all, I know you've been reporting also and paying close attention to this Inflation Reduction Act. We've talked to you about this in the past. The president really celebrated yesterday. He signed it, but he also said that he was basically going to go on a tour to discuss and to promote this Inflation Reduction Act. We're finding out more on what it is doing, even for healthcare. James, what have you found in your reporting?
Well, I find that people are very interested in what the president has to say about the bill. I find that people are interested, particularly in the topics of prescription drugs, particularly with the insulin, in terms of being much, much cheaper. I found that people are even interested in the climate aspects of that bill. And really just seriously addressing climate for the first time in a long time. They will look forward to listening to the president talk about the bill because, and that very rarely happens. What happens is that the president signs a bill and then we in the press get to tell people what it's all about, whether we like it or not. But this is an instance where he is actually going on this tour to talk to real people about what this bill means. And I think it could bode very well in the future in terms of, the elections.
Yeah, and James, it's interesting too. We're talking about inflation. We're talking about jobs because this bill is supposed to create family jobs with family sustaining wages. And next week, James, is the anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And I think it's really interesting that today, the march was in 1963. Here we are in 2022, and we're still talking about jobs and in a lot of ways freedom, because a lot of the protections that we have, Americans in general, but Black people specifically, have enjoyed, it seems like are being stripped away by the Supreme Court, by politicians. When you think about 1963 and that famous march led by Dr. King, and you think about today, James, it seems like much progress has been erased. Is that saying too much? Is that overstating it? I mean, what's the forecast now?
Well, it's this thing. You take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. Back in 1963, there were many jobs that Black people couldn't hold, really because of the law. And the law in many states prohibited us from getting into certain professions. And even though we could actually legally get into these professions, it cost so much, and there were so many barriers. We couldn't become easily lawyers and doctors and engineers and in those type of professions. But because of subsequent legislation due to that march, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, indirectly in terms of that your particular concern, we were able to do that. And you are right. We created this very healthy Black middle class that has been going on almost for a half a century. and it looks like it's going to continue to grow. But what we have to do now is expand it to the private sector, Stacy. We have to now focus on our own businesses in terms of growing our community economically through our own businesses. And we have to teach our children, and this is just a suggestion, teach them entrepreneurship instead of just going out and getting a job, but creating a job. And while I praise that aspect of the bill, that it would generate jobs, I just wish that it had more of a focus on teaching people entrepreneurship.
And James, along those lines too, you talk about entrepreneurship. We had the privilege of having Isaiah Thomas, the famed basketball player, the Hall of Fame basketball player, and certainly he's has turned into a Hall of Fame businessman on. And we talked about entrepreneurship, and he had some advice for younger ones as well. But one of the things he does, and he made a point of saying this too, in his family, he has, you know, his children, his nieces, nephews working. What they have done, he's put them through school, and he calls it the Thomas. They get their student loans from the Thomas Bank, but they pay it back by working for the company. And he has a lot of different businesses, so in the field of their choosing, and they pay it back by working 6 months, a year, basically pro bono. And so that's how they pay it back. And then they gain this valuable experience. They can stay with the company, earn a living there, or they can take those skills and go elsewhere. But the point is generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a template, right, on how to do it. Now, not everybody has the resources of an Isaiah Thomas, but you have to start somewhere, right?
Right. And that's really a great thing for him to do. He's trying to keep his business in the family. He's trying to give his family training opportunities to what you just said. They could either stay with the company or go on. But more importantly, he's teaching them to be independent. He's teaching them not to just go out and get a job and work for someone else and have to be dependent on someone else for their income, and in many cases, whether they live stable lives. That is really great that he's doing that. Unfortunately, other people are not doing what Isaiah Thomas is doing. They don't hire their family members. They don't set up and they could. They don't set up a Thomas Bank for their
Yeah.
student loans. They have to go to SunTrust and these other firms to get their student loans, even though their family owns a business. And what he is doing is a model, and it definitely should be replicated. And hey, Stacy, you can't teach this kind of stuff in business school. These are the things that you have to learn in the school of hard knocks. And so that's why I think that what he is doing is great, and we need to do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And James, I also wanted to go back to a story that we mentioned a little bit earlier, the lead that Black children in particular, are exposed to. A new study we mentioned earlier, led by Duke University, found that elevated levels of lead can lead to lower test scores among Black students. And they found too that a number of Black students, basically nationwide, have been exposed to lead in their school buildings.
Yes, and that's something I'm kind of familiar with because growing up, that was an issue in the school system that I was dealing with. The schools in the Black part of town, for some reason, had these really, really crazy amounts of lead, but nobody knew about it. We just figured that's just the way it was. But when I had a chance to go to school in the white part of town, that was not an issue at all. I think this is an issue that needs to be addressed at the local level primarily. We need to have our school boards, city council, county councils, county commissioner courts, whatever you want to call it, examine this issue of lead. It's not going away. There's a lot of lead out here, and we have the evidence to prove that it can damage our systems. It can damage our brains. It can damage the way we function. And we need to try to stop being expedient and cost effective. And we need to make sure that our children can learn. And if lead is an impediment to that, then it needs to be taken out. I know it's cheaper to use lead, but it's just not better in the long run for people in general in order to deal with that. And that's not just in schools, Stacey, and you know this. This is also in terms of some of the older buildings, in terms of residences and apartment buildings, and even in some private homes that use a lot of lead in terms of construction. So that's a real problem.
James, also wanted to throw this out to you as well. Yesterday there were some elections going on, some primaries. Liz Cheney, who is the Republicans' most forceful critic of Donald Trump, lost her House seat. Also, Sarah Palin advanced in the race that she's in for a congressional seat ahead of the 2020 midterms, and now is positioned also to win a House seat. Trump's power is still there, right?
We politics is just getting really, really, and I don't like using this word. It's really getting weird. The thing about Liz Cheney, people talk about what she's doing in terms of really taking it to Trump as well as she should in order to help the Republican Party. What they don't tell you about Liz Cheney is her excellent constituent services, and that as a congresswoman, she really reaches out to her people in Wyoming, and in terms of the services that they need. I'm not really concerned about this, but I find it interesting that you have this lady Hageman who is poised to take over that position. She's going to start as a freshman here in Capitol Hill, and she won't be able to do anything really for her constituents except the basics of that. And then so you're losing a little seniority and a little star power due to Liz Cheney. And Sarah Palin, I think is very interesting that a woman who was nominated to be vice president of the United States is now scrapping, and for a former governor is scrapping to become a congresswoman. And it just shows you just how fortunes can quickly change on people. Here you have Sarah Palin, once a household name. She still is a household name, and talking about running for the top spot now, really, really fighting to become a congresswoman. That's just how interesting politics is.
Yeah, and we see that list there, Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump, and they all, James, have been facing massive losses, and if not losses, then certainly blowback because of their stand. So it's really become a situation where it's not about right or wrong, is it?
Right, right. And this is the sad thing about the Republican Party. You're seeing the fall of the Republican moderate. This really started in Ronald Reagan when he won in 1980. And with the exception of a few people such as Howard Baker or Richard Schweiker, which he ran for president with in 1976 against Gerald Ford, you haven't seen the Republican moderate stepped up. Now, George H.W. Bush was a moderate, but he had to campaign as a conservative in order to get the Republican nomination. And he lost in the 90s. He lost to Bill Clinton, but his son picked up the mantle of conservatism. So the Republican moderate has really, really kind of died. And that is very sad because many of the great Republicans in history were moderates. They were not these hardcore conservatives who really run their mouth but accomplish very little in terms of legislation and actual policy. So, but that's their party, and they have to decide what they're going to do. If the Republican Party falls by the wayside due to Donald Trump, which looks like I can see that happening, then so be it.
Well, James, Liz Cheney, she said that she's committed to a broad and united front to defeat Donald Trump, as he's going to seek, apparently is going to seek election in 2024. In fact, Liz Cheney says that she is considering a presidential run herself. How would that look?
I think that would be a very dynamic race. given her pedigree with her father being a former vice president, but not only that, um, he still has deep ties to the party. And as a female, she could definitely shake up some trees, and maybe she can wake up these moderates that are still in the party to get them together and unite. And in order to take back the Republican Party, maybe she can work out something with Larry Hogan here in Maryland, or Charlie Baker in Massachusetts. And in terms of getting that wing of the party back into the fold, in terms of talking common sense, in terms of their way of looking at things, so free market ideas on businesses and economics and education, school choice instead of school segregation, which is what a lot of Trump's people want to do. So I think that would be a very, very healthy discussion should she decide to run for the nomination. As a student of politics and history, I hope she does, because it will make it more interesting.
Well, it is very interesting. Also, James, we're coming up on the time when all of the student loan abatements are going to pass by, and all of this debt is going to come due. We're only about a week away from that happening, and we know that yesterday the Biden administration did cancel almost $4 billion in ITT tech student debt. But there's is and has been this large cry for the administration to cancel student loan debt. What's the downside, James, if there's any?
Well, on the surface, there is no downside. This will allow people to free up debt so they can order to do other things, such as purchase homes, purchase cars, save money, and be able to do the things in order to enjoy the good life of America. The thing is that you're looking at the financial, what that will do with financial markets. How deep will that push the deficit, this country into the deficit? Do I think that he should do student loan debt cancellation? Yes. And the person in me says all student debt should be canceled. I'll say that if he were to cancel or go into the process of canceling or sponsor legislation that would cancel, Stacey, even maybe 75% of student debt, he would be doing our country a great favor, because really that's holding us back in terms of people, particularly the younger people, from buying homes, from buying cars, from moving out of their parents' house and getting on their own. But even some older people, such as myself, they're still dealing with this student debt. I mean, good grief, President Obama and Michelle Obama, they paid off their student debt when they were in the White House, and they went to the Harvard Law School. So in the late 1980s and the 90s. So that just shows you what a real problem it is. And I hope the Biden administration does something in order to do that.
And James, what about the argument? I've heard this argument that canceling all student debt, and I believe even the White House has kind of cringed at it, only, well, not only because, but one reason is because you're canceling debt. If you're canceling all student debt, that means those wealthy individuals, right, wealthy families who can pay, there's a thought that they should pay, but then you can't. Can you? I'm saying you can't, but can you say, okay, we're going to cancel these folks' debt, but you guys still have to pay? Politically, that seems like it would be a disaster.
Yeah, and then it's not fair, and then you're dealing with issues of equality and equity. Equity. I don't buy that argument. I can understand why that would make people nervous in the White House politically, because it looks like you just kind of, you pointed out, one group can do it, one group can't. Remember, Hillary Clinton said, when Bernie Sanders brought this idea up in 2016, when Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders were running against each other, Hillary Clinton would say, well, Donald Trump's kids, well, she was talking actually about tuition-free college. She was saying that Donald Trump's kids shouldn't be able to go to school for free. And that was her point. But how many people are Donald Trump's kids? How many people are in that particular group of that you're kind of alluding to? The average American is not, or the overwhelming majority of Americans are not. So this would definitely help the overwhelming majority of Americans. And somehow the system will filter out where people who can pay will pay. But this is really designed to give Americans a break and give people a break in order to be able to function in society financially.
Yeah, the latest statistics from Student Loan Hero says that Americans owe nearly $1.75 trillion in student loan debt spread out among about 48 million borrowers. That's about 412 billion more than the total U.S. auto loan debt. So when you think about auto loans, you think about student loans, and we know, and maybe this is apples and oranges. We know some years ago the government did a major bailout of the auto industry.
Yeah.
So is that apples and oranges? And can you make the same case here that how you bail out students, and that loan industry? I mean, you're not necessarily bailing out the lenders. You're, in this case, it would be the recipients, the borrowers.
Well, see, here's the thing: is I like that. I like the fact that you brought that out because that's a trillion, $1.25 trillion. I mean, that's trillion with a T. And I'll go back. I remember as a young lad, I remember that my sister, when she went to college, she didn't get any student loans, but she had friends who had student loans. And all they had to do when they graduated was pay like $5 or $10 a month. And that's just how cheap college was. But nowadays, students are really taking out a mortgage in terms of getting their education. And that's absolutely ridiculous. I think, and I like the way you termed it, bailout, because, we bail out the banks, we bail out the auto industry. Why not bail out the American people? And not with these skimpy little $1,200 checks that people get so excited about, but, we bail them out really with this, with student loans, and it can be done. And those people say, well, it will wreck the deficit. It may, but the United States prints its own money, and they'll be able to take care of that. And the dollar is still the strongest currency. It really is in the world.
Well, James, we'll leave it right there. Appreciate you jumping on this morning. Again, we apologize to our viewers. We know that we were expecting to have a conversation with Lakiesha Poole regarding the African American Virtual Career Fair that's coming up next week. Perhaps we can find out more information soon on that. But thanks again for joining Let It Be Known. We will see you tomorrow.